I'm Femi OK. Welcome to the stream. This Ramadan, Muslims around the world are being asked to stay at home.
This Ramadan.
This Ramadan.
This Ramadan.
This Ramadan, I'm staying at home.
To protect our doctors,
nurses.
To protect our NHS.
To protect our superheroes.
This Ramadan.
I am praying for the world.
I'm praying for the world.
Praying for the world.
But from home.
From home.
From home.
You can be a lifesaver.
Protect our frontline staff.
Protect our NHS.
Protect our doctors. Our nurses.
And save lives.
Save lives.
Save lives.
Save lives.
And you can do all of that
by just staying at home.
Stay home.
Iftar at home to protect our NHS and save lives.
جزاكم الله خيرا. رمضان مبارك.
Ramadan Mubarak.
Ramadan at home is a hashtag and also a campaign asking Muslims who are observing Ramadan to stay socially distant because of the coronavirus pandemic. But how is that going to work? Does it work? You can tell us by jumping into our YouTube chat. We'd love to bring your experiences into today's show. But let me introduce our guests. Ramadan Kareem, everybody. It's so good to have you here. Rabina, welcome. Tell everybody who you are.
Thank you. Ramadan Mubarak to you all. My name is Rabina Khan. I'm an elected member in London, a councillor, special advisor in the House.
Good to have you. Hello, Ruwaida. Introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Ramadan Kareem. I am a reporter at the Huffington Post, based in New York City, where I cover Islamophobia, social justice issues, and the like on a national level.
Great to have you. And finally, Joseph, welcome to the stream. Tell everybody who you are.
Thank you. Ramadan Kareem, everyone. I'm Joseph Lumbard. I'm a professor of Quranic Studies at the College of Islamic Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha, and I'm one of the contributing editors and authors for the Study Quran.
Good to have you. Welcome, everybody. Let's start with this idea. There's so much preparation that goes into Ramadan, but the idea of observing it during a lockdown, what is that even like? Rabina, you start.
Particularly as a mother and as a working mother has been very different. So as a mother preparing the house, making sure that our immune system is boosted with good product and making sure that we're eating healthy as well. And I'm lucky because I live in a house, I have a garden as well, but I often have to support people who live in cramped conditions, who are overcrowded, who are finding it very difficult to homeschool. So preparing constituents, making sure that they've got access to support in terms of supporting their own families, and also working with charities on as part of our mutual aid programs to reach vulnerable and elderly people who are often very isolated. And so for me, what I found in preparing for Ramadan, the most important aspect is that we shouldn't forget that a time of Ramadan is not just thinking about ourselves, but also about other people and reflections. So in terms of reaching out to people and making sure.
Rabina, I'm just looking at a tweet that you shared a few days ago, and you were talking about getting ready with your children, your nephew. Ramadan, mosques will be closed, prayers streamlined, and iftar gatherings go digital. We can find ways to be together. Joseph, this idea of a digital Ramadan, what does that mean? What have you seen and what are you doing?
Well, for myself, I will quite honestly say one of the experiences that a lot of people who embrace Islam later in life have is they often don't feel as embraced by the community. And so it's funny, there was actually a meme that somebody was running that said that it was one person was like, there's a born Muslim, and he's like, oh my God, Ramadan without going to the mosques every day and out without gathering for the family for iftar. And the other guy's looking at him going, oh, first time, huh? This is a regular experience.
We're going to come back to Joseph. He's got a slightly challenging internet connection, but we will come back. Did swear though, and I did share, and I'm going to share this with you as well. And it's about what you call iftar, which is the way that you break the fast at the end of your fasting day. And on this tweet, this is what Joseph shared. So what can we call iftar by Zoom? Ziftar or iftoom? Ruwaida, have you experienced this?
That was actually my wife's.
Yeah.
That was my wife's tweet.
Nice. Came back just in time. What is it like? How do you even do iftar by Zoom? Ruwaida, jump in here.
Yeah, I think at least here in the U.S., we've seen this creation, what we've dubbed here as e-iftars. I think that's the terminology that we're going for. And it's this concept of trying to members and relatives, whether it's at home or at a mosque or at a dinner party, that people are going to do it online. And so and Skype for work all day, let's use it to connect. And I think to kind of jump on Joseph's point, I was talking to one woman for a report that I was doing not too long ago who had embraced Islam later in life, and she had heavily relied on those communities to kind of help her feel that spirit of Ramadan. And she was worried about the loneliness that she was going to have to go through this month. And so one of the ways that she's going to combat it is to set up a iftar, ziftar, whatever we want to call it, every night with different friends and families. And I think it's a way to kind of feel a little bit of community during a time where we're physically apart.
And I am going to say, as somebody who shares an office with many wonderful Muslims who observe Ramadan, obviously socially distant now, of course, what food that they're salivating over, that they can't eat quite yet, but they're going to eat later. So in that tradition, iftar, a big iftar with my family. I'm drooling right now. About 40 family members digitally. The food in my house was very real, as you can see. Enjoy that. It looks gorgeous. All right, so let me talk about something that actually is quite challenging. And for that, I want to bring in Hatim Shah. He is a medical student and he's in Pakistan. And in Pakistan, the mosque will be staying open. And Hatim Shah tried to explain to us why that is, what it is about Pakistan's culture, where family is so fiercely and togetherness is so fiercely cherished that people would perhaps...
In culture, we have this saying called "Mar Pane Death." This loosely translates to "everyone's death is ready." And most people are using this as a justification to not socially distance. Because as a culture, us Pakistanis are very family orientated. Another big problem we will be facing is the fact that Ramadan is the month where people give a lot of charity. And it will be very hard to follow protocol during these times while also feeding the less fortunate.
Joseph, I'm wondering that the headlines from Pakistan are incredible, considering that so many of us are practicing social distance, at least physical distance, whatever faith that we're in. What do you make of mosques in Pakistan staying open at this time?
Well, I don't want to single out any one country, but I don't think that this is necessarily a responsible move. Is what is the actual or not? That is the transmittability factor of coronavirus. And people have said, oh, it's a some kind of scheme to get people out of the mosques. And I'm afraid that some of that type of attitude has played into these decisions. And this is something where it should be left to the medical experts and the muftis and the ulama, the scholars. They need to say that this is an area where we need to abdicate to those who have better knowledge of how such situations should be handled.
How much guidance have there been, Rabina, for Muslims around the world about how you should observe this unique Ramadan, where you can't get together as you would normally do, you can't have fellowship as you would normally have it?
What statement saying that mosques should be closed and that gatherings should not happen? And I think that government has also been proactive, as is our council, and across the political parties as well. But there is one aspect that we should also talk about, which is guidance for NHS Muslim workers, National Health Service, and people who work in hospitals who are keeping fast. So I had a question from one of the MPs that I support, Daisy Cooper, who I work with a different number of politicians from the Liberal Democrats. But what she asked me, and it was very pertinent, is what should I be giving the advice or the information about Muslims who are working in hospital settings? So the Muslim board of imams and scholars have given direct information that whilst they can give guidance, the ultimate decision has to be the health professional who is working in that setting, so that it doesn't impact on the patient. So there is guidance out there, but it's about sharing the protocols and sharing good practices.
With you, it comes from Nigeria, and Yusuf talks about villages and communities in Nigeria. They can't do digital iftars, they can't jump on Zoom, and he talks about the options that are left are sponsored programs from local radio stations. So if you don't have broadband internet and a connection that's almost as good as yours, Joseph, if you can't connect in that way, how else can you connect?
I think I've been seeing that people have been getting super creative and connecting in ways that are beyond the internet. I've talked to a few people who said that they wanted to go outside and reconnect with nature, right? Because this is something that's also emphasized in the faith. Talking about connecting with the, seeing creativity in terms of how are we practicing traditional elements of the faith. I'm sure you know better than me in terms of the practice of seclusion, right, and meditation are big practices dating back to the prophets, and is something that is celebrated in Ramadan. And so I think that is probably something else that a lot of Muslims are practicing this month.
Joseph? Thoughts on that one?
Yes, this is actually a very important point. Thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, the opportunity is when we talk about connecting, the most important connection that you make in Ramadan is the connection with God and with the Quran. And all of the other connections that we make should be viewed as secondary to that. And at times we get distracted by the social dimensions of Ramadan from focusing upon its ultimate purpose, a cleansing of ourselves. And the Prophet's custom was in the last 10 days of Ramadan, to go and to withdraw from society. And inshallah, perhaps that will be something that more people will be inclined to do in these last 10 days, because that's where the true spirit of Ramadan is to be found. And that's even in the Quran. In when it talks about Ramadan, it doesn't say Shahr Sawm, it's Shahr Quran. It's Ramadan in which the Quran was made to descend. And the purpose of fasting is almost opening yourself up so that you have a space for the Word of God to be instilled within you, and thus make that connection while you've cut off all of these connections from the rest of the world.
I'm just looking at essential workers who are out there who are also observing Ramadan. Firefighter. As a Muslim firefighter and paramedic, I've adjusted not only by wearing PPE, personal protective equipment, on every call, but also praying more at the fire station, especially after breaking my fast. Rabina, in London and in the UK, this whole idea of observing Ramadan when it is so difficult and so challenging for health workers right now, and stressful, and then on top of that, to be in the holy month of Ramadan. Can you give us an example of what that may be like?
Well, where I live, the hospital, London Hospital, is just up the road from me. So I often speak to some of the health workers and staff, and some of them are my constituents. It becomes very difficult. Hence, the person who is in that situation must make the decision themselves. Whether or not they can fast. But obviously it's obligatory that if you break a fast and you don't keep that fast, you must make sure that you keep that fast at a later date. So hence shifts, the shifts that they do, the people that they have around them supporting them is fundamental. But most important, fundamental is making sure that you yourself are safe, making sure the people that you care for are safe, and making sure the environments, and many of them could be working in ICU units, that pressure within that unit is limited. So if they feel that they cannot keep it, it is their decision, and they are more than informed to make that decision.
Ruwaida, I want to bring you in here because you've been working on a number of stories where you're of Ramadan. For instance, this headline here from one of your stories: Anti-Muslim propaganda is seeping. Can you give us an example?
Absolutely. And I think the important thing to note here is that unfortunately, anti-Muslim rhetoric is not only global, but it's been prevalent for a very long time. And so when the pandemic hit, it really was a matter of taking advantage of people's vulnerabilities, of their fears, of their very valid concerns, and then using that to promote toxic disinformation, misinformation about the Muslim community. And it was a trend that I've seen in many places and in different parts of the world, but the three that I've highlighted in that report was the UK, the US, and in India. And in the UK and the US, we primarily saw the use of old footage, right, of, say, last year's Ramadan, people who have a history of promoting anti-Muslim rhetoric and saying, look at these Muslims who are not to their mosques, they're still gathering, etc. And not only is that false, because again, we're using old image here, but there's a message that wants to vilify and demonize the Muslims, which is ironic, like Robina said, because so many of them are on the front lines, are essential workers, are out there providing the utmost care. And we're seeing that here in the US as well. We've had another challenging point in the US where the president, Donald Trump, retweeted a tweet talking about a disparity between the churches and the mosques and wondering if authorities were going to crack down on the mosques and people gathering in the mosques, which is, again, false information because the mosques have been closed. It's not that like they were planning to open for Ramadan. They were closed from the first local and state and federal discretion where gatherings were banned. Homophobia, we've seen, like you said, the mosques have chosen to stay open for Ramadan, and before that, were still vehement about going out and gathering, and therefore a number of cases have spread because of this missionary group, and Muslims face the consequences. You had fruit sellers who were banned. You had a Muslim man who died by suicide because he was vilified for being associated with this group, and so the impacts of this propaganda is quite real.
Could I add to that one thing?
Yeah, Joseph, please go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I mean, we also need to, when we put this all in the context of coronavirus that originated in China, one of the things that the whole spread of coronavirus has done has caused everyone to look away from what's happening to the Uyghur Muslims. And that has been an absolute humanitarian crisis for Muslims. And it's something that Muslims need to take into consideration if they're worried about being in lockdown during Muslims, because that have it far worse than those of us who are able to participate in this conversation, both right here now and listen to it, have.
I'm so glad you brought up the weaker Muslims, because on YouTube, our audience there has been chatting about helping the poor. Shivansh Jitendra says it's harder for the poor to receive iftar and zakat during this month with the lockdown, curfews and social distancing, it's harder for them generally. This whole idea about how are you able to fulfill your charitable deeds during Ramadan if you can't go out and make meals for people who are less fortunate than yourself. Rabina, how are you able to do that?
So the most important aspect with this pandemic and at the start of Ramadan is that many charities, Muslim, already begun to make sure that they are creating the facilities to give out and distribute meals and unperishable goods as well to people, particularly those who are very elderly, particularly those who are vulnerable, the people, the families who are often very isolated because they are in isolation due to the fact that they may have people who have got contracted COVID-19. And on top of that, I have to give a great deal of tribute to the people who are carrying out the funerals and burials during that time.
Asiel Kamani Care, thank you for being on YouTube with us, says, for those who don't have anything to eat, Ramadan teaches us to care. Remember the poor and weak people wherever you are, which really segues beautifully into Saeed Jaffrey. Unusual Ramadan reminds us that we should be doing charitable deeds as Muslims during this holy
Ramadan under quarantine is allowing us the opportunity to follow the essence of Ramadan by empathizing with the poor. We can do two things. We can help the needy and the impoverished communities by giving charity, especially in this time of crisis, and we can stay at home and save the lives of the poor. And God would be very happy with us and with the way we are observing Ramadan.
So I'm just thinking here, Joseph, about the purity perhaps of a very different kind of Ramadan, where you're not working out how many dinners can I go to, how many iftars can I go to, where are you going tonight? How is this perhaps enhancing your faith as a Muslim?
One of the most important things is that really the one of the main things that you also have in Ramadan that a lot of people go to the mosques for is ilm, is learning, is knowledge. And there's actually been a real proliferation of people starting podcasts and other things on YouTube and other places to help fill that void. It's almost too much, in fact. Sometimes there's so many things that I'd like to do. I could fill my whole day with them. But this is something that I think might actually be a great opportunity for a lot of people and find ways to connect with other communities. But I hope that they don't take place of what happens in the mosque. And again, that aspect of not being able to do charity in person is very difficult. But again, a lot of opportunities to practice it. And inshallah, when we are able to go back in more in direct giving in the way that is our custom as Muslims.
Ruwaida, we're right at the very beginning of Ramadan, but for you, how has it been so far? Just very briefly to wrap us up.
I have to say I do miss my caffeine, but I'm blessed to have a home. I'm blessed to be surrounded by family. I'm not alone, and I'm looking forward to making the most out of this month and listening to what my fellow Muslims are doing as well.
And two comments from Twitter, two different comments from Twitter. We have Bajamashi, the spiritual uplift will be minimal because there won't be chance for public lectures and other essential gatherings. And then accentuating the positive, Fulani says, I am Fijian. We believe the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, received revelation in seclusion. Delightful is a picture of the delicious iftar dinner that Rabina shared with her family digitally. So I'm going to do that just the same to you. You can salivate over that. And all I'm going to say is thank you so much, guests, for being with us during this Ramadan. I know that it is not the easiest thing to talk for half an hour when you are fasting, but we really do appreciate you. Rabina, Ruwaida, Joseph, thank you very much indeed. And thank you to YouTube for putting all your comments into our show. And if you are marking Ramadan, Ramadan Mubarak. That's all for today's The Stream Home Edition. See you next time. Thanks for watching.